In today's episode, we speak with Samantha Betten, who says that we cannot escape death, but we can embrace the process. She helps people give one of the greatest gifts that they can give to their family, pre-planned funerals. When someone has pre-planned their funeral, they give the gift of being able to grieve to their family member. If the funeral is not pre-planned, then instead of being able to grieve, someone has to make all of the arrangements, and not everyone is able to do that. Listen to today's episode to learn how you can help your family by giving them this important gift.
Talking with people about how to have a great retirement. This is the Rock Your Retirement Show. We don't talk about money, but we talk about almost everything else you need to rock your retirement. Now, here's your host, Kathy Klein.
Our guest for today is Samantha Betten, whose motto is protecting the people you love, the business you build, and the causes you care about. She also says that when life hits those lows, use that opportunity to convert sadness into strength. She's also a well-known speaker, and at speaking engagements, her goals are to, quote, rock the talks, end quote. So I had to have her for Rock Your Retirement. She likes to engage the audience, speak with purpose, and make a wonderful, warm impression, even if it's not a happy topic. Taking care of families and helping folks in difficult times, before and after, takes integrity, ethics, and trust. She has over 20 years experience in community outreach, marketing, insurance, and finance. And her specialties are community outreach, pre-planning life and death, funeral, cremation, and final expenses. And she's a licensed funeral director. And not only that, but she speaks both English and Spanish. She's very involved in the community. She's part of the Caregiver Coalition of San Diego. She's on the steering committee, public relations, and marketing. She also runs the Speakers Bureau, South Bay Senior Providers, National City Collaborative, SOCAN, District Action Committee President, School Site Council President, Operation Family Caregiver for Veterans, Financial Life Planning Advisory Work Group, County Board of Supervisors. Wow, that's a mouthful. Samantha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what got you into this business? When you were 5 years old, did you think, wow, I want to do pre-planning for people?
I went to school at UC Davis, and I won't tell you what year I graduated.
Good, because I'm not going to tell you when I graduated either.
But I actually, after I graduated from UC Davis, I came here to San Diego because my family was living here, and as well as in Rosarito Beach, Mexico.
And wait, you lived in Rosarito Beach?
Yeah, that's where I was raised for a lot of my younger years.
That's pretty awesome. So you must speak really good Spanish.
I do. I speak fluent Spanish, which helps me in every day, with work and with personal.
Samantha is this sort of blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman that you would not think spoke perfect Spanish. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Thank you so much.
So you grew up in Rosarito, Mexico, and then you moved to San Diego. And so what happened after that?
Well, I came here and I was working in actually the auto industry for a long time, helping people do their insurance for life insurance as well as auto insurance. So I've always kind of helped people do something to protect themselves.
So you were insurance sales?
Yep, I sure was.
So how did you like that? This is not an insurance, just for those of you who are first-time listeners to this podcast, this is not an insurance show.
Exactly.
So what did you do, and what did you like about that, and why did you leave that business?
Well, I liked it because I was helping families, protect themselves, either be it protecting their vehicle or protecting themselves if they were to die. Then, as life insurance is to help the living and give sustainability for the family members that are left behind. So that's how I kind of started in the, industry that helped families with the passing of an individual.
So how long did you do that?
A good 18 years.
Wow, that's a long time. Yeah, I would not think that you were in any job for 18 years. You look so young.
Oh, thank you. No secrets will be disclosed.
Exactly. And the good thing about this podcast is we can always edit things out.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's a really cool thing about it. So you were in insurance for 18 years. And so now we haven't really brought up your topic yet, but what Samantha does is she helps people with either pre-planning their funerals or planning the funerals when someone has passed. So what got you into that? I mean, that's not something that you grow up as a little child thinking, wow, I want to
Be a mortician. No.
help people pre-plan their funerals.
Yeah.
So how did you, what made you go into that business?
Well, about 10 years ago, my mom and dad were still living in Mexico and, coming back and forth a lot as well because I had a older son that my mom loved to care for and was spending time up here a lot. But at that time, my dad fell ill and we needed to have him up here full time so that he could get the medical attention that he needed. So my parents sold everything down there, moved back up here, and I started helping them with caregiving. So my mom, couldn't do it all herself. And in the process of helping them, my dad had a serious heart attack and we thought he wasn't going to make it. So they were doing the last rites. And when the pastor came in and started talking to him, he was telling me, well, you have to do something. And I said, what do you mean I have to do something? Here I am thinking, oh my gosh, my dad's going to pass away. And he's like, well, you have to start making these final arrangements.
Well, that must have been tough.
That was the time where I thought, I have to do something. What are you going to do? So I started looking into everything, cemetery, funeral, cremation, kind of burial, just getting all the information I could, in the shortest amount of time possible. Well, in the interim, my dad was able to get a stent put in and he had a comeback, which was wonderful.
Well,
so
thank goodness.
It wasn't his time. But in the meantime, I learned so much about the industry and I just kept delving more and more into it. And I thought, this is my calling. What was I doing with just the, other part of the business? This is what I really need to do because I was feeling a sense of fulfillment, like I was doing something that was going to help my dad, but it was also going to help all of us as well through the financial and the emotional healing.
And your mom, you wouldn't want your mom to have to go through all that while she's grieving for your dad.
No, and you don't think about that until it's too late a lot of times. So
it must have been hard for you too. I mean, here you are thinking your dad's going to pass away. And instead of you being able to prepare yourself for that thought, you're thinking, wow, I've got to do all this work.
You put on your hat and you say, okay, I got to put on my solution hat and be the person in the family to do it because I was the only sibling that lived close by. Of course, it's all, and that kind of tends to be what happens. It's always one person that's the close one that has to, take the decision of, okay, I'm going to do this for everybody. And that's how I started doing this.
And sometimes people aren't always up to that. I mean, what if you have, children and a job and you don't have, what happens when your family member's not up to it?
Well, and fast forward to May of this year, my dad did pass away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And yeah, thank you. And my mom has Alzheimer's, so she's not competent. And thank goodness we did these pre-planning arrangements when we did, because at the time my sister insisted on, and I love my sister dearly, but she insisted on being the go-to person at the passing of my dad. But let me tell you, Kathy, when my dad passed away in May, my sister was so paralyzed with emotions and just, utter helplessness, she couldn't do anything.
So thank goodness it had already been done.
Exactly. And it was just one phone call. Everything had been done at the mortuary. We didn't have to worry. The cemetery had all this information. I mean, everything was pre-done, prepaid. There was nothing that we had to worry about except for, I will say there are some different details that you don't think about. But now that Mom has Alzheimer's, we thought, well, how are we going to get her from the home to the cemetery? So we did get a limousine because that way we could all ride together as a family.
Oh, that's nice.
But that's not something you would think about, in Spanish it's a lujo, or an extravagance. You don't sit there and go, I have to have a limousine.
A limousine, right. That's not something I would think about either.
But when you have a family that can all fit into one car, the main, the siblings, it was nice because she was able to ride with us, and feel part of it, even though we don't know how much she remembered, but at least at the time she was feeling comfortable.
That's really nice. And now that you've actually gone through it, you have the experience that you can talk to people about what it was like in your own situation and certain things that you had to do for your parents, for your dad.
Until you're actually in it, it's really hard to imagine it. I mean, I've been through it so many times with, the families that I've helped, and I could clearly understand that. And we did have deaths in our family before that. I had a brother that passed and grandparents, but yeah, exactly. Until it's your parent or your child or your spouse, it doesn't hit home as much,
Right. Yeah, I have to admit that my husband and I have not done any pre-planning, but we both have an estate plan.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't know if my listeners know this, but in my past life, I was a financial advisor, and I did that for 25 years. And so when my husband and I got married, we went and got an estate plan. And part of that estate plan is what happens when we either get sick or die, and we both decided to be cremated. So what happens in that? Like, do you help people with cremation as well?
I do that all the time. So, like I said before, I help, families that had life policies. Well, sometimes people pass away younger and they haven't thought about it, or they just haven't gotten to it. This is kind of the end of the road that,
Right.
after you have your estate plan, then you go, oh, maybe I need to do this. But some younger folks don't have this. So let's say there's an accident and they have life insurance. Well, I'm still able to help them with that policy to get them what they need at the time.
Okay.
So there's so many ways to help families that doesn't always entail like the pre-planning, because now that I'm able to help them at the at-need portion, I can see how people struggle. A lot of people, they died so quickly in life and they don't have, anything, no equity in their house, no funds available. People are living paycheck to paycheck. And
What happens if somebody dies and they don't have any money? I mean, who pays for that? What happens?
For example, I had a young couple last week. They had they were preparing for their first child. They lived in an apartment. They both, work in industries where it's real hard to save money. They live paycheck to paycheck, and she went into early labor and the baby died. The baby was stillborn.
Oh, the baby.
So I, help them with an, economical cremation option. I try to give them two different options, but what we'll do is we'll work with the family. We'll work with if they're religious, we'll work with their religious, institution to try to get help there. Sometimes people have to do fundraisers depending upon what kind of service they want to have. I mean, in the baby's, situation, they just wanted to have a very simple cremation, and the parents already had a family plot and they were going to put the baby there. But who thinks about that?
I certainly wouldn't think about that. Of course not.
It's a happy time, and then
Right.
it turns into a real sad time. So I try to make things easy for people, and even though sometimes it has to, they're emotional in the moment, I try to make it kind of antiseptic to where like they don't have to worry, where it's just once it's said and done, the paperwork's done, and then eventually if I have to take the ashes to them personally, then I make it more a personal touch. Because then it is an emotional thing. And then it is, I've got to be there for them and answer all their questions and things. But, when you're 22, 23 years old, do you really want to have to deal with this? No, but do you sometimes get thrown in those situations? Yeah.
That's probably not your typical client though, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So how did this 22, 23-year-old even find out about you?
Well, one of the mortuaries that I owned is a small All Souls cremation and burial, and we help people, and we also have San Diego Funeral Service. We have discounted rates for cremations, for infants, and we've let the county and everybody know what's out there. So if people call for a resource, they're able to call in and get a help with the cremation, where some places may charge over $1,000. We don't do that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's nice that you have that option, especially I can't even imagine the grief that poor family suffered.
Well, and next week the baby, I'll be taking the ashes to for delivery to the family. And that's another thing that I feel is important, rather than make the family come to the mortuaries. And I remembered when it happened with my dad, to sit there and think, gosh, I'm in the industry and I'm driving to the mortuary and I'm already feeling the pain of it. And I can't imagine when I have to sign those papers and deal with that. What if I had to bring dad home with me? Or, I mean, it's just, so to me, it's a better experience to be able to go to that family when possible and personally take care of them.
Well, that's a wonderful personal service that you offer. That's really great. And I've known you for a while and I didn't know that you offered that. So that is really cool. So most of your clients, though, are probably older, that they start planning. Yeah. What would you say that the average age is that people start planning their prepayment and pre-celebration activities?
Most of my families that I've helped are in their 50s and 60s.
Okay, so that's pretty young.
Yeah, and the reason being is a lot of them have already done, like you and your husband did, their estate, or they're thinking about updating their wills and trusts and things, and their attorneys, or they're just doing them and their attorneys are recommending them do their pre-planning arrangements in advance. Or some folks are moving into retirement facilities, and it definitely is much better when you have it pre-done. Because otherwise, if you pass away and you're in a facility, they're going to call whoever they want to call at the moment.
Well, the facility does it.
If they can't reach a family member, because think about it, if you pass away in the middle of the night and there's no family member close by, they're not a morgue.
There's usually a waiting period for those rooms, and so I know the facilities like to, get the rooms prepared.
And we try really hard. I mean, myself and my arrangers and, my pre-planning counselors, we try hard to get to the facilities and offer pre-arrangement, seminars, or just let people know that it is possible to do this ahead of time. And it not only helps the family, but it helps the facility.
Of course.
Some people think of it as, oh, you're just trying to, get them to spend money. It's like, no, it's trying to save them money now, because they have to spend it at some point, because we all, 100% of 100 of us are going to die.
That's right.
So do you want to save the money now and have it all arranged, or do you want to wait till the time and like you said, worry about it? And how do you think about it at the moment that it happens? It's a tough one.
I would think that it's an act of love to prepare your celebration of life in advance so that your family can focus on grieving and not focus on, what you may or may not have wanted. That seems to me that's the ultimate act of love.
It is. And most of us are also now in the sandwich generation, the 40-70 rule. If you're in your 40s, most likely you've got a parent that's in their 70s.
Right. And kids.
Yeah. And you want to, do something. And a lot of children are helping their parents make the plans ahead of time, but they're all coming to agreement, because it's, like you said, it's an act of love, and they all want to make sure that everybody's happy with that final decision and solution. So if you can get everybody together to talk about it, it's great. Does it always happen? No.
Plus, then there's no fighting among siblings.
Yeah.
If it's already done, you don't have to worry about Susie says, oh, well, she wanted this music, and Sammy says, no, I know that she would have wanted this. And
well, you've heard about it. Weddings and funerals are the worst, arguments. And let me tell you, I've seen quite a few different, hands flying over the tables. And I was at a nursing home a couple weeks ago, and boy, a family member, there was one brother that was an outcast, and this was the first time in years that they had been together. And unfortunately, it was because they were pre-planning mom's funeral and cemetery services. And they started yelling and screaming, but by the time we were all done, everybody was talking again. Everybody was back to being a family again. And it could have gone either way.
So you're almost like a family counselor in a way.
Sometimes you feel like it, because all I'm bringing is the facts. I come with the facts. I take in information of what they want. I design what they're telling me they want, and then representing it to them so that they can see, this is what you're telling me that you guys want. And then they either add or delete what they don't want. And that's when I'm hoping they all come to agreement and resolution and we move on, because it's about helping your loved one. I always look at it's not about you, the mom, the dad, the brother, the sister, the child, whatever. It's about the person who you're doing this for.
Right.
If they can't do it themselves.
Right, of course.
So are most of your clients people who haven't made any decisions at all and they come to you after the person has passed or maybe when they're in hospice? Or do most of your clients come when they're in their, 50s and 60s before they'll ever need to make decisions? Are they advanced planners or are they planning at the last minute?
Now, because I have experience with the after someone passes as well, I see both. However, I still tend to get more of the folks that want to plan ahead. And it varies, but a lot of times I'll get grandchildren where they're the ones that are going to be helping grandma and grandpa make the decisions because maybe mom and dad can't do it. They're just not capable. So that's where I'll get a lot of my referrals is on the pre-planning. But then, like you said, there's a lot of folks where, because I used to help people more so in their life choices, when they are hitting their retirement ages, it's time for them to start taking that final step of saying, okay, so what are we going to do if something happens? Where are we going to go? Are we going to be cremated? Are we going to be buried? I mean, there's so many choices. Once you've planned out your retirement, you think you're done and you have to go, wait a second, we didn't hit this next step of decision making. So.
Right. And it is so important. And it sort of goes hand in hand with pre-planning what you want to do if you don't die. Do you ever get into those discussions as well? What if you, live 10 years and, what do you want to do? Do you want to get a feeding tube? Do you ever talk to your clients about that?
The most important document that I've seen, in all these years of helping families is that advance directive. And one of the questions that I begin with, obviously I try to get to talk to them a little bit and get a little bit more familiar with what their thoughts are on why they're starting to talk about this. But my biggest question to them is, have you done your advance directive? And I will tell you, 75% of the folks that are under age 60 do not know or have this document. I would say 50% over age 60 still don't have this document. And it's really important. And then I go on to add, even to get a HIPAA waiver. And I'm not an expert on those two documents, but what I do know is those are the documents that when we're in the hospital, when we're in hospice, up until after death, because one of the first things as a funeral director is that I will ask families are, do you have an advance directive? Because that takes priority over anything, then spouse, then child, and it goes down the line to the 13th degree. So yeah, those are some of the big questions that I talk to families about.
I usually don't talk about what I do for a living, so I'm not going to say it outright, but I had a client whose husband died and she got a bill from Medicare that was over $100,000. And Medicare would not speak with her because she didn't have a HIPAA form on file.
Oh my gosh.
So she had to deal. Now I was able to help her deal with the insurance company that should have paid that $100,000. I was able to help her get that paid. But I can tell you, my husband and I both have HIPAAs on each other. And it's funny because if you use more than one medical group, you have to get a HIPAA on each medical group needs their own HIPAA.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I know it's important to have that. And I know recently they were talking about doing the electronic where it shares into kind of like the MBIs where it goes into the system and everybody has access to it. So that would be nice because, my thing is when somebody is 18 years old, those are the two important documents you should getting out of high school. Okay, you're 18 now. You need an advance directive and a HIPAA waiver because if something happens to you and we know accidents can happen. It's just best to have those documents.
Absolutely. Well, my assistant even has a limited HIPAA waiver on me because she makes doctor's appointments for me and they won't talk to her unless there's a HIPAA form on file.
My goodness.
But my HIPAA for her just says scheduling appointments. It doesn't say that she's allowed to, get all of my medical information, although she pretty much knows everything about me anyway.
Right. Funny.
But yeah, so after the HIPAA, after the advance directive, and then you're speaking with them, must be a very difficult conversations to have with your clients.
If you do it in a pre-planning arena, I guess you could call it, It's not, because at that point, there is no emotional or financial pressure. So we're sitting around. It could be their dining room table. It could be in a living room. It could be at my office. It could be at Starbucks. I mean, I have Denny's. I've made arrangements or pre-planning arrangements out on a bench in a cemetery. So if you're sitting there and you're not feeling grief or anything as of yet, it's not a tough topic to discuss. When it's hard is when I have to sit with those families after a death has occurred and then have those conversations, because most of the time you have 5 different ideas of what that person wants coming from, a parent or a sibling or a child. They all have different ideas of what the person who passed away wanted. But if I get to talk to them ahead of time, it's a much lighter, easier conversation. And I feel like it's kind of like negotiating a business or your retirement, or, when you sit down with your financial planner, it's kind of the same thing as, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put it into writing. We're going to plan it. It's going to be done. And I always say then you put it in your file and you don't look at it again.
Tell me about a typical day, if there is one, in your business.
Well, for example, I usually will have appointments for pre-planning. So I'll either meet folks at maybe a caregiver event or just throughout the community by being out there and out doing a lot of outreach. So folks will call me and we'll schedule an appointment with them. And like I said, I'll go to their home. I'll go to their place of work, wherever they want to meet, to sit down and just start the discussion. And that's usually what I'll do a couple of times during the day. Sometimes my day starts out where somebody's passed at 1 a.m. and I've taken that call and I've had to coordinate to go have them picked up and taken into our care. And then I'll schedule to meet with them, or my staff will first thing in the morning to start their at-need funeral arrangements. So my day varies. And then I also pre-plan cemetery arrangements as well. I don't do at-need cemetery, but I do refer to any of the cemeteries that I work with based on if they're faith-based or if they're just the demographic or geographic desire.
What about veterans? Do you work with them at all?
Oh, yes. I'm actively involved with Operation Family Caregiver, which is for the veterans that came back from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars with TBI. I was at one point married to a gentleman that he later, 12 years later, was diagnosed with PTSD. And had we known that, we may have continued to be married. I don't know, but it was very difficult. And so I took that as a cause that I do as a volunteer to try to make the lives of those families better when those young widows and young wives are dealing with all the stress of their loved one who came back from war. My dad was also a veteran as well from both World War II and Korean War. So I talk to veterans a lot. I talk to them about pre-planning. I'll talk to them about just finding out if they need resources. I try to connect their families to whatever sorts of benefits that they may be entitled to by getting them outreach to the VA or whomever I can contact in the veteran circle that I have. So it's not just all about, the funeral cemetery or cremation arrangements. It's about whatever that veteran needs. I'll go that extra mile to make sure I connect them to the right department or person to get that.
So let's say somebody is worried about their parents and they don't really know what their parents want, and their parents are, say, 80 years old. Most of the listeners to this show are baby boomers. And so they're between the ages of, they're in their 50s, 60s, and maybe 70s. But mostly 50s and 60s are the listeners to this show. So let's say somebody has an 80-year-old parent and they really have no idea what their parent wants. They don't know if their parent has done any pre-planning, or parents, if they're both still living. What would you suggest to them in order to get them to get this pre-planning done? Well,
sometimes it's not just, asking them. It could be showing by examples. So maybe a child, an adult child could say, well, Mom, Dad, I went today and I did all of my pre-planning. I made the decision to have a plan to do my cemetery, my funeral, or my cremation, and it's all done. And let me show you what I have. Sometimes just the example or leading by example may help the parents say, you know what, if my child can do this, maybe I can do this too. And it looks like it was easy and it wasn't hard for them emotionally to do this.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of the interview, Sam, and there's a couple of questions that I usually ask everybody that I interview, even if they're not retirees. And so if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But I know that you work with a lot of retirees, and my question might not have anything to do with what you do for a living. And the first one is, what do you think people should know before they retire?
Most people plan their money, their long-term care, their housing, but they don't go that final step of pre-planning for the inevitable. So they need to plan it in the way that they want it.
Okay, that's good advice. The second question is, we have a lot of listeners who are maybe they're new retirees, or maybe they feel stuck somehow in their lives at the moment. They're not having a good retirement. And if you were sitting across the table from a new retiree or someone who feels stuck, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them to have a successful retirement? In other words, you've seen people who are having great retirements. What are they doing that the stuck person isn't?
Successful retirement to me, and this is what I would let a person in front of me know, would be when your dreams and your plans come together and your worries are minimized. So do whatever you can do to have minimum worries, minimum drama, minimum fears when you retire, so you can just go out there and enjoy life to the fullest.
Great advice. How can my listeners contact you for more information about your services?
You can call me at 619-913-3834 or 619-280-0101. You can email me at preplanwithsam@gmail.com. And if you're looking for an actual funeral service, you can go on the website, SandiegoFuneralService.com.
Thank you so much, Samantha, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you. It's been a joy to be here.
Great. And for my listeners, thanks for listening. Don't forget to go online and subscribe either on iTunes or Stitcher or Podcast Addict. You can also leave a review for us as well. We'll see you next time on Rock Your Retirement.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Retirement Show. If you are rocking your retirement or know someone who would make a great guest on our show, please send us an email at podcast@rockyourretirement.com.
Are you a senior who's thinking of buying or selling a home? Is it time for mom and dad to think about moving to a retirement community where they can get more help and care? You need a realtor who specializes in working with seniors and understands their special needs. Patty Phillips is a senior real estate specialist, and she helps seniors sort through the difficulties involved with moving. Contact her today to get honest and caring real estate advice. Call 800-680-9133 and ask for her report, The 5 Things Seniors Need to Know Before They Move. Call 800-680-9133 now.